Medieval warfare wasn't glorious. It was brutal. Large-scale battles were rare. Smart commanders avoided the risk. Instead, they used chevauchée, systematically burning enemy crops, villages, and livestock, starving peasants into submission without a single duel. Sieges lasted months. Those inside would ration food, then eat horses, then rats, then boil leather belts for gelatin. At Antioch, crusaders resorted to cannibalism. It's on the historical record. 80% of soldiers died not from enemy blades, but from disease. The Mongols catapulted plague-ridden corpses over castle walls during the siege of Kaffa. That outbreak became the Black Death, killing 75 to 200 million people. The chivalric code only applied to nobles. Ordinary soldiers died nameless in the mud, not heroes, victims. Let me give you a shocking statistic. 80% of medieval soldiers died not in battle, but from disease. 80%, meaning 8 out of every 10 soldiers were defeated not by an enemy arrow, but by a microbe. Camp hygiene was horrific. Think about it. Hundreds of men, sometimes thousands, camped in one area, sharing the same water sources. No sanitation system, everyone stepping outside to relieve themselves, or a pit dug somewhere in camp, everyone using that. Water gets contaminated, food spoils, waste piles up, no hygiene whatsoever. Diarrhea sets in. Sounds harmless, but in the Middle Ages, diarrhea was deadly. You die of dehydration. No medicine, no IV fluids, no modern healthcare. You simply suffer and die. Dysentery spreads. Bloody diarrhea. Worse, more deadly. Malaria runs rampant. Mosquitoes everywhere. No treatment. You die trembling with fever. Typhus takes hold. Your body itches. You burn with fever. Your mind clouds over. You die. During the Crusades, armies would be cut in half before even reaching Jerusalem, without seeing any combat, just from disease along the road. During the First Crusade, 1096, approximately 100,000 people set out from Europe toward the Holy Land. When they captured Jerusalem, 1099, only 20,000 remained. The rest? Most died from disease, died of starvation, got lost along the way. And the worst part, commanders used this as a weapon. When besieging an enemy castle, hurling diseased animal carcasses inside was standard practice. Dead horses, dead cattle, dead pigs. You load them into catapults. They land inside the walls. They rot. Disease spreads. You poisoned wells. You threw dead animals into the enemy's water supply, or human corpses. The water became undrinkable. Those who drank it fell ill. You catapulted corpses specifically to trigger plague outbreaks. Yes, you read that correctly. They flung human corpses with catapults. During the siege of Kaffa in 1346, a Genoese colony in Crimea, the Mongols besieged the city. But plague broke out in the Mongol camp. Soldiers began dying. What did the Mongol commander do? He catapulted the plague-ridden corpses into Kaffa. The bodies landed inside the walls. The plague spread. People inside the city fell ill and died. Some Genoese escaped by ship. But they took the plague with them. The ship sailed to Italy, France, Spain. They carried the plague everywhere. This outbreak spread across Europe and is known as the Black Death. 1/3 of Europe's population died, 75 to 200 million people, one of the greatest catastrophes in history, one of the earliest examples of biological warfare in the Middle Ages. Even the Mongols had used germ weapons. Okay, but at least the sword fights were epic, right? Hollywood lied to us. Again, real medieval sword combat was nothing like what Hollywood shows. Elegant sword dances, dramatic poses, one-on-one duels, slow-motion clashes, all of it is fiction. Real combat looked like this. You're wearing heavy armor, 20 to 30 kilograms of it. You can barely move. You can barely breathe. You're dying from the heat. The inside of that armor is like an oven. Sword strikes barely damage armor. Cutting through metal armor is nearly impossible. You land a blow, you hear a clang, and that's about it. Your opponent staggers slightly, then comes right back. So everyone is trying to knock each other to the ground. You push. You grab. You wrestle. You try to sweep their feet out from under them. Got them down? Now you kill them. You drive a dagger through the weak points in the armor, the armpit, the neck, the groin, because the joints are where the armor is weakest. A dagger can get through there. Or you pry open the helmet and strike the head with a war hammer. The war hammer was a popular weapon. It could crush metal armor. Death from a hammer blow to the head was fast. This was no different from a street brawl. Crude, dirty, chaotic. At Agincourt, after the English won, they climbed on top of French knights who were stuck in the mud and killed them by driving daggers through the joints of their armor. Why were they stuck in the mud? Because French knights were heavily armored, 40 to 50 kilograms of armor. The ground had been soaked by rain and turned to mud. The knights sank into it as they walked. They fell. They couldn't get back up. English infantry climbed on top of them, pried open their helmets, drove in their daggers. It was not an honorable death. It was like drowning in mud. Helpless, unable to move. No French knight had ever imagined dying like this. He had expected an honorable duel, an equal opponent across from him, a fair fight. In reality, he died crawling through mud, breathless, while an English infantryman drove a dagger into his skull. The Romans looked down on archers. Similar prejudices existed in the Middle Ages too, but the English thought differently. The English developed the longbow, and this weapon changed everything. The longbow was a massive bow, 2 meters in length. Drawing it required incredible strength. An ordinary person couldn't even pull it back. It took years of training. English law made archery training mandatory for men. Every Sunday, bow practice in front of the church. Children started from a very young age. The result? The English produced the finest archers in Europe. The longbow had a range of 200 meters. It could pierce armor. It could fire 10 to 12 arrows per minute. Fast, deadly, effective. At Crécy, English archers stopped the French army cold. The French attacked. Arrows rained down. Thousands of French knights died before they ever reached the English line. At Agincourt, the same thing happened. 6,000 English against 20,000 French. The English won because they had their archers. The French charged with their knights. The English archers unleashed a storm of arrows. There were so many arrows that the sky went dark. Literally. The sun was blotted out by arrows. French knights fell. Horses were struck by arrows, collapsed, and crushed the riders on top of them. Knights sank into the mud. English infantry finished them off. 10,000 French soldiers died. The English, maybe 400? It was a massacre, and it happened because of the archers. By the late Middle Ages, archers had become the single most important element on the battlefield. Nobody was calling archers dishonorable anymore because archers were winning. You've seen it in movies. Massive catapults, enormous stone balls flying, castle walls collapsing, explosive sounds, action, excitement. A stone is thrown, the wall crumbles. Boom. Seems logical, right? The reality, much more disappointing. In the Middle Ages, what you call a catapult was actually An incredibly slow, incredibly clumsy, and incredibly frustrating machine. It wasn't like Hollywood shows throw a stone every 5 seconds. Quite the opposite. Building a catapult would take months. First, you need to find suitable timber, massive tree trunks. Then you need to find craftsmen to carve them. Then you'd set up the mechanism, ropes, pulleys, weights, balances. Complex engineering work. And you had to do all of this on enemy territory because catapults weren't portable. Too big, too heavy, too clumsy. Let's say you've built it. Now what are you going to do? You're going to fire. How many stones can you throw per day? Maybe 10, maybe 15. If you're very lucky, 20. I'm serious. Maximum 20 shots per day. Why? Because reloading the catapult took 20 to 30 minutes. You needed dozens of men to pull the weight, ropes being pulled, pulleys turning, the system slowly tensioning. Aiming was guesswork. No modern computerized sights. You had to account for the wind, estimate the distance by eye, use trial and error. Preparing stone balls was difficult. Finding appropriately sized round stones. Not easy. Sometimes the stones needed to be carved. Sometimes the balls were heated in fire to burn enemy wooden buildings. Each one took time. And most importantly, the machine broke down. Constantly. Ropes snapped, wooden parts cracked, the mechanism jammed. Each breakdown required hours of repair. The result? During a siege, you'd be throwing stones at the wall with your catapults for maybe weeks, hundreds of stones, and the wall was still standing because Middle Ages castle walls were thick, 3 meters, 4 meters, sometimes 5 to 6 meters thick. A stone hits, opens a small crater in the wall, that's it. The wall doesn't collapse. Think about it. A 5-meter thick mass of stone. A stone ball hits it. What will happen? Some surface damage, but the wall doesn't collapse because there are tons of stone behind it. To really break down castle walls, what did you need to do? You needed to throw hundreds of stones at the same point, continuously, systematically, patiently, days, weeks, sometimes months. And meanwhile, what are the people inside doing? They're repairing the wall, coming out at night to fill the damaged parts with rubble and stones. You're shooting during the day. They're repairing at night. An endless cycle. You're trying to destroy. They're building. So why were big guns so popular? Because they had a psychological effect. Imagine being inside a castle under siege. Every 30 minutes, a massive stone hits the wall. Boom! The sound is heard. Buildings shake. Dust spreads. A terrible feeling. Constant waiting. Where will the next stone fall? The wall? A building? On us? Morale collapses. People panic. They start thinking maybe we should surrender. That was the real power of catapults. Not physical damage. Psychological damage. Of course, there were also creative uses, remember? The plague corpses at the Kaffa siege. They were being launched with catapults. Or live prisoners. Yes, you read that right. Sometimes prisoners captured during a siege would be launched into the castle with catapults. The message was simple. If you don't surrender, this will be your end too. Terrible? Absolutely. Effective? Psychologically, yes. But physically breaking down castle walls, very difficult, very slow, very exhausting. The truth is, catapults generally didn't work. Most sieges were won by starvation, not catapults. Catapults were for show. They meant, look how powerful we are, see how serious we are. The truly effective siege method? Digging under the wall. Okay, catapults don't work. Is there a faster method? Yes, but much more dangerous and much more terrifying. Digging under the wall. This was called mining, but not gold mining, quite the opposite. Digging the foundation of the castle wall, then making it collapse. This is real Middle Ages engineering. Filth, darkness, narrow tunnels, and constant risk of death. How did it work? The siege army would start digging a tunnel close to the castle, secretly, silently, underground. Goal: reach beneath the castle wall's foundation. Who did this? Miners, usually recruited from peasants. Real mine workers were most valuable because they had tunnel digging experience, but most of the time anyone who could hold a shovel was hired. These men went underground, digging in narrow tunnels, in darkness, in dust. Light? Only candles. Ventilation? Poor. The tunnel could collapse at any moment, and they dig, all day, all night, meter by meter. How long? Weeks? Sometimes months, patiently, silently advancing. Do those inside notice? Sometimes. They feel ground vibrations, they hear digging sounds. Then what? They dig counter tunnels. Yes, those inside also go underground, trying to find the enemy tunnel. If they find it, underground warfare. Imagine, in a narrow tunnel, in darkness, two groups of miners meet, attacking each other with swords, knives, axes. You can't move, no escape. Only the enemy in front of you. A terrible experience. Underground, unseen, unknown. Winners come out. Losers stay there. Sometimes they'd flood the tunnels, redirect underground water, enemy miners drowning as the tunnel filled. Sometimes they'd deliberately collapse it, cave in the ceiling while enemy miners were inside, crushed underground, a slow, dark death. But let's say the attackers succeeded. The tunnel reached beneath the wall's foundation. Now what? They put in supports, wooden beams, planks, supports holding the tunnel up. Because the earth is dug out, there's a void, there's the wall's weight. Without supports, the tunnel would collapse anyway. After setting up supports, what do? They leave, move away from the tunnel. Then, they burn the supports from a distance. They fill the tunnel with flammable materials. Pig fat was popular because it burned well. Then they set it on fire. The fire burns. The supports burn. The wooden beams weaken. And then, boom, the tunnel collapses. The earth above descends. The wall's foundation is left unsupported. It collapses. The massive stone wall, tons in weight, sinking downward, cracking, breaking apart, collapsing. The siege army watches. The wall slowly tilts, cracking sound, stone rumbling. Then, boom, dust cloud. A hole opens, entry into the castle. The siege ends. Soldiers run in through the hole. Defenders panic. No more wall, no more protection. The castle has fallen, and all of this from a tunnel dug underground. The miners' work, hidden from sight, forgotten by history. But heroes or just wretches trying to survive? Because tunnel digging was the most dangerous job. Risk of collapse, drowning, underground warfare, poisonous gas. And what did they earn? Most of the time, nothing. They just survived. Maybe a small reward, maybe some extra bread. But the truly terrifying aspect, nobody knew when or where it would happen. You're inside the castle. Everything seems normal. But underground, beneath your feet, the enemy is digging. Silently. One day you look at the wall, normal. The next day, there's a crack, a small crack. The next day it grows. And one morning you wake up, the wall has collapsed. Imagine the paranoia, constant anxiety about the ground. Is the earth beneath your feet safe? Is the enemy there? Is there a tunnel? Some castles set up listening posts. They'd place bowls underground, fill them with water. If the water vibrated, it meant digging underground. A primitive seismograph. But it worked. Sometimes. At the Rochester Castle siege, 1215, King John had a tunnel dug. He had 40 pigs brought. He wanted the fattest pigs. Why? Because he would burn the pig fat. They dug the tunnel, reached beneath the corner of the castle wall, set up the supports, slaughtered 40 pigs, poured the fat into the tunnel, set it on fire. The wall collapsed. The corner tower fell. The defenders were shocked. Tunnel warfare, more effective than catapults, faster than starvation, safer than field battle. But nobody sang songs for the miners. Nobody wrote epics, because they weren't honorable like knights. They just dug in the earth, doing dark, dangerous work. Hidden heroes again. Or hidden victims. That's how Middle Ages warfare was. Visible heroes, knights, gained glory. Invisible workers, miners, foot soldiers, peasants, did the real work, and history only remembered the visible ones. Romanticized stories are nice, but the reality was this: large battles were rare. Most of it was small-scale looting and burning. Peasants suffered the most, and nobody cared about them. Sieges lasted for months, and those inside died in horrific ways. Disease was far deadlier than the sword. The knight's code of honor only applied among themselves, not for anyone else. Ordinary soldiers died nameless, while knights claimed the glory. Personally, I consider myself lucky to live in the modern age. Because in the Middle Ages, I would either be a peasant on some lord's land watching my crops burn with every war, or get conscripted and die of dysentery in a camp tent. If I was lucky, maybe I'd become an archer. But then the aristocrats would look down on me. Not a real warrior, they'd say. Bright armor? That belonged only to the wealthy. And even they could get stuck in the mud and get a dagger through their throat. History is sometimes not honorable at all. Just very, very bloody. And the Middle Ages? It was one of the bloodiest periods in all of history. Think about it. 1,000 years of constant war, generation after generation. Grandfathers died in war. Fathers died in war. Sons died in war. Lands were burned, looted, rebuilt, and burned again. And what did they gain? Did anything change? Lords changed, perhaps. Borders shifted a little. But ordinary people, they always suffered the same pain. Medieval warfare was not glorious. It was not romantic. It was not honorable. It was just pain. Long, slow, merciless pain. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Medieval Reality. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode or what topic you'd like to see covered next, so drop them in the comments below. There is so much more to explore from this fascinating and brutal period of history. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. As always, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.